Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's learning webinar with Envisioneer. My name is Chantal, and I'm going to be your host today as we discuss walls. We're going to look at different ways to draw walls, the information behind walls, and different ways that you can manipulate the walls as well. Following the presentation, I'm going to open up the chat panel where you can type in any questions that you might have about walls, and I'll be able to answer those during the broadcast for you. So make sure that during the broadcast, you do type in your questions as we go, and I will look at them at the very end. So let's get started in talking about walls. I'm going to click on the Walls tool up at the top of the screen. And what you'll notice when I click on the Wall tool is there's a little black arrow beside it. Any of our tools that you see in the toolbar that have a black arrow beside it, that means there's options that you can do just other than walls. So if I click on the little arrow, you'll notice a drop down appears. So I can draw walls as you're used to doing, or I can use walls by baseline, or we also have a room division tool. I'm going to start off by drawing walls by baseline, just to show you an alternative way to draw walls. The walls by baseline tool allows you to sketch out a single line diagram. And when you sketch out that single line diagram, once you've got it drawn, you then choose what that line represents, whether it be the outside face of the wall, the inside face of the wall, or the stud portion of that wall. So if you have exact dimensions and you want to type them in, this is the most accurate way to do so. So I'm going to click on a wall in our catalog to get us started. I'll use the 2x6 stone wall. And then I'm just going to move my cursor onto the drawing screen. Now when I left click to start drawing, what you'll notice is that it's a single line. Normally when you're drawing with just the Walls tool, you'll see that bulk of the wall. Now it's just a single line. At the bottom of my screen, you'll see distance and direction. This is where I can type in exact distances and directions that I want the wall to go in. So I'm going to start off by typing 25 feet, hit enter. I'm going to move my cursor up. Notice when I move my cursor up now that it's forming like a triangle. When I use the Walls by Baseline tool, it's always going to hinge itself back to that original start point. So think of it as drawing by putting in a nail where you're first putting in your very first point, and every time you hit a corner, you're going to put another nail, and you're just kind of putting an elastic band around the area that you're outlining. So that elastic band is always going to stretch back to that very first point. So I typed in 25 feet. My cursor was facing to the right-hand side, or 0 degrees. I hit enter, and I put in that first line. Now I'm going to do my second line. So I'm going to pull upwards. Look at the bottom of the screen where it says direction. Now that it's going upwards, the direction now changes to 90 degrees. The distance, I can type in any distance that I want, or I can watch the on-screen dimensions. I'm going to type in 15 feet. And then again, it's just hitting enter. And now it's put in that second line. So when I move my cursor again, I put in another nail at that corner, and I'm stretching it out to do the next point. So I've went 25 feet, 0 direction. I've went up 15 feet. Now again, I'm going to the right, that's 0 direction. This time, I'm going to type in 10 feet. Again, direction equals 0, and hit enter. I'm going to move my cursor upwards. And again, it's always going to be going back to that original start point. I'm going to type 10 feet again and hit enter. Now I'm going to move my cursor all the way to the left. And when I do that, looking at the bottom of my screen, you'll see that the direction says 180 degrees. I'm going to move it all the way over until I'm in line with that very first start point. I'm not holding down my left mouse button at this point. I'm just moving my cursor. I want to show it that I want to be in line with that original start point. So all I do is hover my cursor over that area. Not holding down a left mouse button, not left clicking down there, just moving it there so I can see and sense that corner. So when I pull away, it'll show me how to be perfectly in line with it. You'll notice up at the top of the screen, coming off of that corner, there's a line. It's showing you that line that it's drawn from that original start point that I hovered over and how to be perfectly in line with that corner. It'll automatically fill in my distance and my direction for me because I've hovered over that point. So it's showing me to be perfectly in line with my very first start point, I have to go over in 180 degrees, 35 feet. I'm going to accept that distance and direction by hitting enter. You'll notice that I can still keep moving my cursor. It doesn't know that I'm done. It might think I want to come down a little bit and maybe go out. I have to tell the walls by boundary tool, baseline tool, that I'm finished. To do that, I click my right mouse button. And when I click the right mouse button, it comes up with 3 choices. Am I finished? Am I done my outline? Do I want to cancel? I didn't really mean to use this command. Or do I want to step back? Step back allows you to step back the last distance that you might have typed if you made a mistake. So when you're using the walls by baseline tool, and maybe you typed in 15 feet and you meant 10 feet, right-click, hit step back. It'll allow you to redo that length that you've been typing in when you've been making this outline. I'm happy with my outline. I have all of the dimensions typed in accurately, so I'm going to choose Finish. Now what it wants to determine in the dialog box that appears on my screen is, with that outline that I've drawn, does that match the outer face of the veneer? So did I trace around the stone face of the wall that I was putting in? Because remember, in my catalog I chose the 2x6 stone wall. Or is it the outer face of the stud? Or is it the inner face of the wall itself? This allows you to be really accurate when you're typing in those dimensions. So if you're working on dimensions that you might have taken on site, perhaps it's a remodel situation, and you were inside the home taking those dimensions, you could tell it that 25 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet dimensions that we've been typing in are the inside face of that wall. Or you can say that it's the outside face. If this is a new plan that you're coming up with and you like your dimensions to go to stud and those dimensions that you typed in are to the stud face, this is an excellent way to be able to type in those dimensions to the stud line. At the bottom of this dialog box, you'll also notice there's an offset option. So if you want your dimensions, as an example, to go to sheeting, not to stud, you could choose the outer face of stud option and then do an offset. So maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, whatever the thickness of the sheathing that you're going to be using. So it's going to that sheathing line, not your stud line. So lots of options. So when you're typing in those original values, they're going to come out accurately for you, following the dimensions that you want them to read. I'm going to choose the outer face of veneer. I'm going to leave it at a 0-inch offset, and I'm going to click OK. When I click OK, it changes that single line diagram on my screen to match the walls that I've drawn. I'm going to move down here to the zoom window tool, click on it. It changes my cursor into a magnifying glass, and by holding down my left mouse button, I'm drawing a box around the plan I just drew. When I release the left mouse button, then it's going to magnify that plan on my screen so everyone can see it a little bit better. So there you can see the outline of the walls that we just drew on the screen using the walls by baseline tool. So for those of you that maybe came in a little bit late or have never used that tool before, it's an excellent way to draw the exterior walls in your plan if you know the dimensions to begin with, because it gives you that opportunity to type in those exact dimensions and also to determine that that dimension that you typed in is to the outside face, the inside face, or the stud line of the wall that you're drawing. So it gives you that added accuracy that you need when you're drawing. I'm going to now pick on the walls tool because I want to draw some interior walls as well. So I'm going to go back to my catalog, scroll down until I see interior framed partitions, and I'm going to choose a 2x6 interior wall. I'm going to move my cursor onto the drawing screen, and now I'm going to illustrate to you how to just point and click on the screen to start and stop the beginning and the end of a wall. I'm going to move my cursor over an existing intersection of our exterior walls and move it right in here. Notice when I move my cursor onto that corner that my cursor changes. When it's not on that corner, it looks like 3 interconnected walls, letting you know that you're in the wall command. But when I move it onto that corner, that intersection of those 2 exterior walls, my cursor changes to a circle with an X on it. That's our snap cursor. It's letting you know that you're close to these walls, and it's going to snap to them for you. So you're going to have a nice, clean intersection at those corners. So always wait, hesitate until you see that circle with an X on it when you're connecting walls to make sure that you're connecting them properly. If you don't see it, the walls aren't going to intersect properly, and you might have a little gap between your walls. So always make sure that you wait, hesitate. I see the circle with an X, I left click. And now I'm drawing that wall right from the intersection of that other wall. I'm going to move my cursor up, and I'm going to go up to this perpendicular wall above. When I get to that perpendicular wall above and I put my cursor on top of it, now look again, you'll see that circle with an X again. It's letting me know it's sensing the wall is there, and it's going to snap to it for me. So it again creates a nice clean intersection. So when I left click, I've got the wall drawn on the interior, and you can see that they've got nice clean intersections. Let me show that to you one more time. I'm going to move my cursor onto that corner. I wait, I hesitate till I see that circle with an X. I left click, and now I'm going to pull my cursor out to the left. As I move my cursor out to the left, what you'll also know when notice when you're drawing walls is that there'll be an online dimension there going with it as well. Those dynamic dimensions allow you to see how long that wall is. And they're going to correlate directly to the bottom of the screen where you see distance and direction. So in the dynamic dimension, I see 7 feet, and in the distance box below, I see 7 feet. I can watch those dynamic dimensions on the screen until it reads something that I'd like. So if I wanted exactly 7 feet, all I'd have to do right now is left click, and that wall was now drawn 7 feet. If I start to pull down, it's automatically going to start to draw a wall directly connected to that last corner. So it's continuously going to draw walls until you tell it that you're done. If I know an exact dimension that I want this next wall, I can type it in. You'll notice down at the bottom of the screen in that distance box, distance is highlighted blue, which means that it's active right now and waiting for me to type in a distance that I might want. So as my cursor is pulling down, I'm going to type in 2'6". All I have to do at this point is hit enter. My direction is coming down. It's saying 270 degrees, so it's pointing towards the bottom of the screen. My distance is typed in 2'6", and I hit enter. And it draws that wall 2'6". So if I move my cursor back up, you can see that dimension. Now I'm going to pull it over all the way so that it intersects again with this existing exterior wall. And because I want it to intersect properly, I'm going to wait and hesitate until I see that circle with an X, so I know that it's snapping to it properly. And I left click. So we've drawn walls in a few different ways now. The exterior shell of the building, we drew that with our walls by baseline tool, so we can get those accurate dimensions. The interior walls, we used a point and click method, waiting for that object snap to appear, and we typed in exact dimensions. The next tool that I want to show you when you're drawing walls is what if I know the distance that I want to start a wall away from a corner. So as an example, I'm going to move my cursor just up on this existing wall that's here. Notice when my cursor is on top of that wall, I haven't left clicked, I'm just simply placing it over top of that wall, the dimensions automatically appear. It's guiding me to show how far away I am from each of those receptive corners. So I'm 3'7.5" an inch from the upper corner, and I'm 4'7.5" an inch from that lower corner. So I can move my cursor until I see a dimension that I like where I want to be right away from that corner. Another way to get yourself away from a corner, an exact distance, is to right click. So I'm just going to move my cursor into the middle of the room here, and I'm going to right click. So clicking my right mouse button in the software will always reveal options for you. Options of how I'm going to insert for this particular wall, how I'm going to insert it. So I can say finish, oops, I really didn't mean to choose the wall tool, I'm done, let's end it. Insert by baseline, which we went over for our exterior walls. And the last option you'll see there is enter insertion offset. It wants to know how far off a corner I want to offset this next wall. So I'm going to enter an insertion offset. here I can type in a distance. So this is the distance that I want to start this wall away from a corner. So I'm going to type in 3 feet. Always remember that foot sign. The software assumes inches always, so if you leave off the foot sign, I would be 3 inches away from a corner. Typing in the foot sign lets it know that you want 3 feet away from the corner. For those of you that like typing in inches, you can certainly do so. So I could type in 36 and just go, and it would know I'd want 36 inches or 3 feet. But if you want to type in feet, remember that foot sign, the apostrophe, usually located right next to your Enter key. I'm going to click OK. Now, as I hover my cursor around various walls, it'll show me how to be exactly 3 feet off the corner of that particular wall. So as I move it, you can see it's 3 feet off the corners. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer because there's something else I want to show you. The 3 foot can either be from this face of the wall, from the right-hand face of that interior wall, or if I move my cursor slightly towards the left, now it's going to go on to the left face of that wall. So anytime that you're taking an offset, make sure you're on the right face so that you're getting the right dimension as well. So now that it's close to that corner, all I have to do is left click. I don't have to put my cursor close to that dimension. As long as I can see it, my cursor will jump to that 3 foot mark away from that corner and start to draw the wall. So I simply left click to accept it. Now my cursor jumps down there and it's ready to start drawing that next wall. That's using our offset tool. Again, now that I'm drawing this wall out, I can watch the on-screen dimensions where it says 7 feet here, or I can use the distance and direction at the very bottom to draw the wall itself. I'll accept the 7 foot dimension by simply left clicking and then move up, put my cursor inside the exterior wall. Looking at my cursor, I've got the circle with an X, the object snap. I simply left click to accept it, and it's there. So now I have those 2 walls drawn on the interior. I'm going to right click and let it know that I'm finished drawing walls for now. Another way to insert walls into your plan is to copy walls that are already existing there. So I'm going to left click on that last wall that I just drew. When I left click on that last wall that I just drew, you'll see that it highlights itself. It highlights itself green, and little dots appear around that wall. There's a green square where I started drawing the wall. There's a red square where I stopped drawing the wall, and there's a blue square in the absolute middle of the wall. Those are what we refer to as grips. Those grips will allow you to modify the wall in certain ways as well. So if I hover my cursor, and I might just zoom in to do this a little bit more accurately and so that you can see it a little bit better over the internet as well. I'm going to put my cursor over top of that green square. Notice the change in my cursor. My cursor went from looking like an arrow, and when I put it near that green square, it looks like a wall with an arrow coming out of it. That means it's ready to stretch this wall. If I want to use that green hinge point to start stretching the wall and make it longer. So simply by holding down my left mouse button and not letting it go, I can stretch that wall and make it longer and connect it down to this next wall below it. When I release the left mouse button, it stretches that wall down and makes it that new length. I'm going to left click on the wall again. Again, you see the green grip, the blue grip, and the red grip. Start, stop, and the midpoint. This also will allow you to determine sides of the wall. We'll look at that when we start editing the wall as well. Now that I have this wall in here, you'll notice that it doesn't highlight the other pieces of the wall. The original section of that wall is not highlighted, or the piece that I connected into is no longer highlighted as well. Anytime a wall hits an intersection, it sees itself as a separate piece of wall. This gives you flexibility in your design so that this little piece of wall doesn't have to have the same finishes as the other pieces. So if I wanted this one to have maybe a different color of paint or a different trim or whatever, because it's a different piece of wall, it can be dressed out differently as well. And because it's a separate wall, It can also house openings and everything separately as well. What I want to do with this wall now is I want to modify it by copying it. So with it selected and highlighted green, I'm going to right-click. And again, by right-clicking always reveals choices. So now I can see the choices that I have with that wall that I've selected. I can view its properties, which we'll do in a minute. I can delete it. Oops, I didn't mean to put it in. I can move it. I can rotate it if I want it to be on a certain angle. I can duplicate it, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to duplicate it to make a copy of it. But the other options that you have for a wall are elevate it. So if you want to move it up or down in its height, so think of having a raised area in your design or a lower portion, so maybe you have a sunken living room. Maybe you have to elevate the wall up or down to move it to suit the new location of where that floor is sitting and you want it sitting on that floor. You can elevate it up or down. I can duplicate it to a location. So if that same wall is going to reside in the exact same place in the second floor or the floor below it, maybe in the basement, I can duplicate that wall to that other location and it will appear in the floor plan above or below that I duplicate it to as well. So that's very helpful when you're designing an additional story, and maybe this wall is a load-bearing wall and you want to make sure that the load-bearing wall resides directly on top or below it in that floor plan as well. I can mirror it, which means I can make a copy of it right on the center line of it. I can replace it with a different type of wall. So if I wanted it to have an entirely different finish, then I can go back into the catalog and replace it with something else so that the material count will be right for the new wall style that I've selected. Lengthen is just like we showed when we were stretching it out from those grip points. I can break it, which means I can break it into two different sections. So maybe in the halfway point of this particular wall, it goes from having paint finish to having a wallpaper finish. By breaking it, I'm showing it where I'm stopping this wall and starting a new one so it can have two different finishes as well. Offsetting, we talked about from where to start it from a corner. This is also a way of duplicating it to be an exact distance away from the original. I can curve it, and we'll look at curving as well. The auto break function will be used by those of you that use wall panels or manufactured homes. You can automatically break the wall into regular sized lengths. So if you know that for your shipments that your length of walls for your panels can only be 12 feet long, you can auto break them so that the maximum length is going to be 12 feet. But let's duplicate it, and we'll use this as our option to duplicate. So I choose duplicate. Notice when I choose duplicate how my cursor changes. My cursor now changes to look like 4 arrows. This is like our move cursor. It's wondering where I want to pick up and move the duplicate copy of this particular wall. So I'm going to move my cursor on top of the blue centerline grip, and holding down the left mouse button and not letting it go, I'm going to drag a copy of this wall over. And then I'm simply going to release my left mouse button. By doing that, I made a copy of that single piece of wall and duplicated it over and dropped it. As soon as I dropped it, by releasing my left mouse button, dimensions appear to show me how far away this particular new wall is from my original wall. By putting my cursor over top of the dimension that appears and left-clicking, I can change that dimension. So I can move the wall that I just put in, because it's the one that's highlighted, to a new place. So I'm going to type that I want it to be exactly 3 feet away from that original wall, and click OK. And it picks up and moves that highlighted wall, the one I just put in, over so that that dimension reads 3 feet. Something to remember when you are modifying dimensions of a plan, the wall that is highlighted, the wall that's selected, is the wall that's going to move to accommodate the changes that you make to the dimensions. So with this green wall selected, when I clicked on the dimension that was 2'11" and changed it to 3 feet, it picked up that wall and moved it over an inch to the right to accommodate that new dimension. So we've duplicated the wall. Let me zoom out. I'm going to select this exterior wall. And when I select this exterior wall, again, notice that it highlights just like the other ones did on the inside. I see my grip points and I see my automatic dimensions. And look how nicely they read because we used that Walls by Baseline tool to type in the exact dimensions that we wanted, and I chose the exterior face. With this wall selected, I'm going to again right-click to reveal my options. I'm going to go down to the Curve option and choose Curve. Look now to the bottom of my screen where we usually see distance and direction. Right now it wants to know the radius or the included angle because it knows that I'm not inserting a wall, but I'm going to be curving a wall. You'll also notice down at the very bottom left-hand corner of the Envisioneer screen, it says Pick Point on Arc. That's our prompt line. So anytime you're using a brand new tool for the very first time, always look down there to the lower left hand of the screen. It's always going to prompt you on what you should do next. I'm going to put my cursor on top of the wall and hold down my left mouse button. As I hold down my left mouse button and move, it's starting to curve that wall. And it's affecting the radius and the included angle that you can see there. So as I'm moving it out, I can just simply move it out to show it the radius, or I can type in a radius. I'm going to type in 5 feet and hit enter, and it's going to radius that wall out to a 5-foot radius. Now I'm going to select the front wall, and again, right-click to reveal our options about that wall. And I want to look at the properties of the wall before we end off the class and look at your questions. So again, for those of you that may have come in a little bit late into the class, we are going to be having a question and answer period at the end. So if you have any questions about anything that I've shown you so far, make sure you type in your questions so I can address those at the end of the webinar. By right-clicking and looking at the properties of this wall, it brings up all the information that's in the background of this particular wall. So what I can see about this 2x6 stone wall under the Basic tab is that it's a framed wall. So not only will it draw out the wall itself, but it'll also frame it for me following the framing member size that I've chosen down here. So right now it's showing me that this wall is going to be framed with 2x6s. So it's going to lay it out and frame it with 2x6s. When we're looking at plan view of the wall, that's when it's going to look at these properties of the wall itself. So the core width, our stud wall portion of that wall, is going to be 5.5 inches apart. The two lines that represent the core are 5.5 inches apart. You also have the opportunity to make this, the lines of this wall invisible in 2D. Normally people use that option for dormer walls. They might want to put the dormer in, see the walls in 3D, but they don't want to mess up the look of their 2D floor plans, so they hide them in 2D. So you have that option of any walls you may not want to see in 2D, you can make them invisible. The exterior surface, our stone portion of this wall, is 3.5 inches. So the walls representing it are 3.5 inches apart. There's an inch between the 5.5 inches and the 3.5 inches. There's a little space between them. That's what we refer to as airspace, can be an airspace, or it can also be the space between them that has your sheathing in it as well. So make sure that that space is reflective of the difference between where your stud wall ends and your stone, the back of your stone appears. We also have the options here for lowering the bottom of the wall and raising the top of the wall. So when I look at the wall itself, and I'm looking at these options, I'm going to pick on it so this illustration to the left changes for us. You'll notice that the veneer of the wall, the stone, can drop further than the stud wall to reflect how you would build it. So when you're building it perhaps on top of your floor joist and your subfloor, you want to drop that face of the veneer to cover all of that up. So this allows you to drop that down. So it's going to come down, in my case, 11.5 inches, reflective if it was covering up some floor joists there. You can also raise the top of the wall here so that just the veneer goes up. The roof framing is going to rest on top of the wall, but the actual finish is going to go up just a little bit higher into the wall itself. And then we have our left interior surface and our right interior surface. Those allow for the drywall on the inside face of the wall itself. How wide is it? Is there an airspace? Perhaps you've got some sound retention clips that are going in there. This airspace will allow you to show that as well. If you're drawing a wall that's not connected to your exterior walls, if it's just sitting out to the side, maybe it's a wing wall, it won't show the exterior faces because it's not connected into the entire shell of your exterior walls. So you could force it to be exterior. Once I get out of this dialog box, I'll show you exactly what I mean with that. So you can force either side of a wall, if it's not a part of your continuous exterior shell, to be exterior and show the stone on both sides. And then down below that, we've got some framing options. Is the wall load-bearing or non-load-bearing? And for those of you that are using our building essentials and construction suite packages, that gives you the opportunity to customize the framing and the headers that are going to go over any kind of opening in those load-bearing or non-load-bearing walls. It also includes itself in some energy calculations. So if you're using ResCheck and you're exporting the data from your model to ResCheck, this allows you to type in the type of wall type, the cavity R value, and the continuous R value as well for that particular wall. If the wall, if you don't want it to be a framed wall, maybe it's concrete or anything, you'll notice if I pick this and change it to concrete that the framing member option grays out. It knows it doesn't have to look at framing. It's only when it's a framed wall that's going to include the framing in that wall. There's also a top and bottom page. This is where you can change the height of a wall. So as a default, all of the exterior walls are going to go to auto extend, which means they're automatically going to extend up to any plate height you put on the roof itself. So when I put the roof on top of these walls, if I change the plate height on one portion to be 10 feet, another portion to be 8 feet, the walls will actually grow and shrink accordingly because they're going to automatically extend to whatever plate height I put above them in the roof above. Other than that, you can put it as just a straight, flat, level height, so more reflective for our interior walls. If I want them to be 8-foot or 10-foot or 12-foot walls, this is where I can change that wall height. You can also slope the walls. So look at the green dot, look at the red dot in this little diagram. That marries to the plan that you're drawing. Remember, we have the green start grip and the red start grip. What's the A height at the green dot? I could put in a value here. And what's the height of the wall at the red dot? And you can put the value in there. So this will allow you to get sloped walls into your plan. Think of cathedral walls that you may have, or in a staircase. You can match that, any slope of the wall, or step the wall. And again, this is probably more for a staircase wall, or it could be maybe a focal wall where you want multiple stepping down options. Again, it reflects back to the green dot and the red dot in the plan. Looking at that green dot, what's the height of the green dot? That's my A value. What's the height at the red dot? That's my B value. And what's the maximum step? It's going to break the wall into equivalent heights of steps all the way down from one point to the next. What's the maximum step that you can have or that you want it to have? So if this was your staircase, you could say 8 inches or 7 inches or whatever you need that to be. So the exterior walls, again, as a default in our catalog, are automatically going to extend. So they'll go in at their original height of 8 foot, and then from there, if you put a roof on it that has a raised or a lower plate height, the wall will shrink or grow accordingly. The base of the wall itself can also be sloped or stepped. So think of your stepped foundations, your daylight basements. This is how you're going to accomplish that with your walls. So once you get the walls in, you can come into this top and bottom tab, set it to stepped. What's the height at the green dot? What's the height at the red dot? Put those values in accordingly. And what's your maximum step value according to your local building code that it can have. And then again, it'll break it down into equivalent steps all the way down to achieve the difference in the two heights. But the wall bottoms are, as a default, set to level to begin with. All the walls that you put in can automatically have trim associated to them so that when you're drawing on the interior and you're looking in 3D, they have the trim that you want to see, and it'll also quantify it for those of you that are using building essentials or construction suite. So this is where you can specify what trim that you want. So when you're working with an interior wall, you're going to have the left-hand side of a wall and the right-hand side of a wall. So how do you determine what's the left and the right when you're looking at a wall that's going horizontally on the screen like the one I selected? Imagine that you're standing on the green dot of the wall and you're looking towards the red dot. So in our wall right here, I'd be standing on this green dot looking towards the red dot. So then I would therefore have my left and my right. Okay, so that's how you're going to determine the left and the right-hand side of a wall. You stand on the green dot, look towards the right, your left and your right. So the interior walls can have a left and a right-hand side, and the exterior can also have trim to it. So if you have any boards on the outside, perhaps you're doing siding, you want to show the grade board or different boards around it, you can do so. And this is where you would specify them. So you'd say, I want crown, go in and select, choose something from the catalog, or right-click and create your own, and it will add that particular trim to that wall that you've selected. The Appearance tab deals with the look of the wall, not only in 3D in the finishes that are there, but also the 2D line work and how they're going to be represented when you're looking at the wall itself in 2D. So on the left-hand side is all of the components that make up that wall, and as you highlight them, it's going to show you their options over here on the right. So when I look at the exterior surface of the wall, I can see the material that's being applied to it, that Chardonnay blended Southern ledge stone, and we can see that JPEG mapped along that wall. You can select on that either by clicking on the 3 dots here or actually picking on the picture of the material, and that'll take you into our materials catalog where you can select an alternative finish for this particular wall. Maybe you want to show it with a different style of stone. You pick it from our materials catalog. I'll choose this one and click OK, and you can see that it updates. The exterior can also have a hatch pattern associated to this. This is important because you want it when you're doing your elevations to automatically hatch the elevations for you, so you don't have to go in afterwards and hatch those walls. As a default, all of the walls in the catalog do have hatch patterns associated with them, so there shouldn't be any further work that you have to do unless you want to update and change the hatch patterns that are there. There's also the opportunity to solid fill, and that's going to be with our 2D options here. So not only the exterior surface, but the left and the right component, the right side and the left side, 3D options can have their materials chosen with them. So this is going to be the material that it's chosen, and it's the Benjamin Moore Revere Pewter color that was chosen for the inside. And those, of course, can be updated in materials for whatever project color that you need. How are openings represented in 3D? And then under that, in the components list, you'll notice that there's 2D components. The 2D portion of this wall, what does it look like for the core portion of the wall, the stud walls? Well, they're going to have a dark red line to them, and they're going to be solid filled in with this kind of goldenrod color. The 2D exterior surface is not going to have a, it's going to have a blue color associated to it, and it's also going to have that goldenrod. The left surface is going to be a green line here, dark green, and it's going to have that goldenrod. So they're all going to be solid filled in together, but they're just going to have different colors representing them as far as their line color here. For those of you that have Building Essentials in Construction Suite, you'll have the Quantity tab. Everybody will have the Quantity tab, but it's just those that have Building Essentials and Construction Suite that'll see the assemblies and be able to edit those. We do have a full class on quantity, so I don't want to dwell on this portion other than to say this is where the wall itself is going to quantify and get all of its quantity information. We do have quantity documents on our website. There is a quantity webinar coming up in the calendar of events that you can watch as well, and there's videos if you want to skip ahead and watch about quantities as well. So that's all the information that goes into building this particular wall, whether it be the basic tab on how far apart all the wall lines are, the height of its wall, the trim that's being used, how it looks both in 3D and 2D, and how it's going to quantify. I'm going to cancel out of that. So we've covered a lot of information today on walls, and I just want to recap all of it before I open the chat line up for any questions that you might have. So to start off our class today, we clicked on the little arrow beside the Walls tool to reveal that there's different ways to drawing a wall. There's the Walls tool that you may have already used, and this draws the wall in 3D right off the bat, and you're drawing from the center line of that wall. The Walls by Baseline tool draws a single line diagram to outline the exterior wall layout that you want to achieve. When you've drawn in those lines and typed in the exact dimensions for each segment of it, when you're finished, it then allows you to determine that that line represents the outside face of the wall, the stud line of the wall, or the interior face of the wall. So it's a really good method for placing in your exterior wall shell with exact dimensions. When you have exact dimensions to type in, I would use that tool. If you're just coming in as a design mode and you just want to point and click and come up with a spatial plan just by free-flowing design, I would probably use the Walls tool just to be able to point and click very quickly. Once we've chosen the wall from the catalog, there is different methods of drawing the walls other than the Walls by Baseline. We talked about the just snapping in and putting the walls and the importance of waiting and looking for that circle with an X for the snap, so we know that our intersections are nice. We also right-clicked and talked about the Enter Insertion Offset tool. This tool allows us to type in an exact dimension that we want a wall to be away from a corner. And then once we've typed in that distance, it allows us to place our cursor on a wall and it'll jump to that point whatever distance away we told it to. We also talked about copying walls. So we selected a wall, right-click, and chose the duplicate option. We also, in our right-click options, talked about curving a wall. And we looked at the properties of a wall as well to find out all the information behind a wall. What I'd like to do now is to make sure that I've answered all of your questions that you might have about walls. We have recorded today's broadcast, so it will be available to watch again in its entirety. Just give us about 24 hours to upload this to our YouTube channel, and then you'll find it there and also in our archive. So I'm just going to open up the chat panel at this point so I can see any questions that anyone might have. I also want to remind you that we will be sending out a little booklet following today's class, and that booklet will also have printed information about everything I covered today as well. So you'll be able to read about everything in today's class. So let's get to questions. How do you edit an exterior wall so it has wainscoting, like siding above brick and etc.? So when you want a wall to have two different finishes is the question that came up. So maybe it's an interior wall, I want wainscoting on the bottom, maybe some wood panel, and then going to the drywall, or on the exterior surface, I want it to be brick on the bottom and I want it to be siding on the top. So I'm going to select this front wall to kind of illustrate that for you. And I'm going to right-click and first of all replace it so that it's a siding wall. So we'll change this to 2x6 cement board panels. So we can see that it automatically shrunk up there. And if I look at it in 3D, I think some of you are on a screen delay here. Let me just hold up here for a second. And let me cancel out of that because I think some of you were on a little bit of a screen delay. I can see the screen's catching up there. So what I did for this front wall is I selected it, right-clicked, and I chose Replace. It brought me into the catalog. I chose 2x6 cement board panel, and I clicked OK. And then you can see that it has a much different thickness there to that cement board panel than it does the stone. Now that that's a cement board panel wall, I'm going to left-click to select it again, right-click, and I want to look at its properties. When we want a single wall to have two different finishes on it, we accomplish that by trimming out the base of the wall with the finish that we want on the base. So I'm going to click on the Trim tab and then click on the Exterior Surface. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of the options I have for different types of trim on the exterior and go to my Custom option. Now that I've got Custom highlighted, I'm going to hit Select. From there, I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and I can see I've got a 48-inch stone base. And I'm going to click OK. So now it's going to attach that stone base to the bottom of my wall. But you can see it's to the very bottom of the wall. And that's why we have these apply to options here for the offset. So this A offset, if I look in this little diagram here, it wants to know how far up the wall I want this top of this stone to come up. So I'm going to type in 3 feet, or it could be 36 inches. I'm going to click in the gap box, and you can see that it automatically jumps that up. If you have a sill running on top of that base, I would accomplish that by using the chair rail on the exterior surface, hitting select, and I'm going to use a sill here, an exterior sill, and we'll say that it's a 1-inch PVC sill. I'll click OK. And again, I have to show how far up I want it. So I'm going to move it. It was a 1-inch sill, so I'm going to move it up 3 foot 1, so it sits on top of there. So I've got my stone base and my PVC sill sitting on top of that, and then I have my siding. So when you want to trim a wall out with 2 different finishes, go to the Trim tab, click on the exterior surface, go down to the bottom to the Custom. We have different ones in there, brick bases and stone bases to get you started, so you can see the information behind them if you need to create a custom stone or different finish for the bottom itself. But when I click OK here, that wall, if I look at it now in 3D, will be reflective of our stone and siding finish. I hope that illustrated that okay for you and that everybody understands how to do that. That seems to be our only question that's up there right now. So either everybody understood everything that I covered today, you've got a good handle on walls, or everybody's being shy. So I'm hoping it's the first. Never be shy in these webinar broadcasts. These are brought to you for you, so it gives you the opportunity to look and get different feature information on the software. So I'm going to keep looking for different questions, and if anyone else has any further questions, I'll be able to answer those for you. We'll hold the line open for 1 further minute for further questions. And if not, we can end the presentation. And again, remember, at the end of the presentation, we're going to send you a booklet so you can read about everything that we covered. So for those of you that learn better by going step by step through a procedural book, we're going to send you that. And remember that within 24 hours, you'll find this particular broadcast up on our YouTube page, but there is one already up there about walls that you can watch a past presentation as well. I'm looking for more questions. And it doesn't look like there is any. So I do want to thank everybody for taking the time out to join us for today's class on walls. I hope you found it informative. I hope to see you at next week's class and every week thereafter. We do have a 1 o'clock class, or 2 o'clock class every Tuesday for you. And I hope you can join us for each week just to learn a little snippet about Envisioneer. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.